Lynn, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Someone has been sitting there trying to connect to audio for 5 minutes.
Andy, do you want me to come off screen share or?
No, you can leave it on. I'm going to start with maybe 5 minutes at most
Okay,
of housekeeping. Then I have about a 42-minute introduction for you, given all your accomplishments.
just
So you'll have a good 10 minutes at the end to go through everything.
Oh, keep it short.
They say we'll get usually about 7:01, 7:02. I'll start, Jim.
Okay, no worries.
How's everyone doing? Happy Thursday. Almost end of the week. So I'm going to get started with just some of the housekeeping. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be emailing everyone out kind of some feedback and grades from the homework assignments for the journeys you all submitted. Won't be tough grading. We're all taking time out of our lives and work schedules to do this. So thank you for that. And really just want to go through, kind of give you feedback of things to think about, or hey, maybe just here's a different perspective on how to look at it. So I'll try to get that out to people tomorrow. As we mentioned, we have that seventh mysterious week that has disappeared. So we'll just go a little longer that last week. What I will do this week, though, is send out the week 7 homework assignment to everyone. So you'll have that in replacement of the week 6 homework assignment. So I will send that out probably tomorrow also, and probably again every week, just as a reminder until we get to week 6. Couple things on journeys before we get started is when you think about them, think about, are journeys rational? Are they linear? One of the things I wrestle with journeys is, are they really kind of conscious? Do you even know you're on a journey? It's interesting how many brands in nostalgia, or my prior life in candy, are all about, maybe it's something you grew up with, a childhood memory. In candy, the biggest driver of brand equity was childhood favorite. Do you remember that or not? If you're interviewing a consumer, do they remember that to bring it up when they talk about journey? So fitting for the discussion we're about to have, but part of coming up with the journey, and then for next week, thinking about a research plan for your journey, a chance to be creative, to look at it differently. Competition already knows all the obvious touch points, TV, media, online. Is there something you can think about for your brand or your consumer's journey that's different than what others have thought about? That's a great place to find those insights that may become competitive advantages. The other part about a journey, and this will be consistent for next week when we talk about research plans and throughout the class, the more research methods you include in that journey and the journey research, the better the journey will be. It's not just doing one piece of research, it's looking at things through multiple lenses, multiple data points, and seeing something in those learnings, in that data, that is insightful, that's seeing it in a way that no one else has. So, and then the other key thing is, again, who your target is and what your brand and category are should make a big difference in what the journey is. So, you know, my guess is if you're my age, your journey discovering a new product is a lot different than a lot of you that are younger, who may be internet first. If it's a impulse category, the journey is going to be a lot different than it's a car or a washing machine that you may want to sit there and, research for quite a while before you purchase. So just something to think about when you think about what the purpose of the journey is. It really is an opportunity to be creative, look at it differently, and be somewhat customized to who you're trying to reach and what you're trying to communicate. So with that said, one of the great things we try to do in this class is bring people that actually take this learning and bring it to life with great creative, great advertising. And with that, I had the pleasure to introduce Jim Sparrow. So Jim has had some phenomenal experiences. Most recently, he was CMO of Fidelity and is the brainchild behind the Green Line campaign. And he's going to give us some of the learnings he had there. Just give an idea of what the power of great creative can do. They actually had triple digit growth in the financial community through that one campaign. He's held CMO roles for Marsh & McLennan, Ernst & Young, high-level marketing position at AT&T. So just fantastic experiences. He's been on the board of the Advertising Council and the ANA, which is Association of National Advertisers. Launched the ad industry's first ever Multicultural Excellence Award. I can't list all the awards he's won, but if you follow the ad industry, he has a Gold Can Award, a Lion, which is given to the best creative out there, very prestigious. It's global. It's in France. It's a big deal, and a bunch of others. So my pleasure to introduce Jim to you. He has some slides, some great talking points, and if you have questions, pick his brain. So with that, Jim, I look forward to this.
Okay, Andy, thank you so much, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all tonight. What I'm going to talk about tonight is the topic of creativity and how you should think about driving momentum in your companies. And I would suspect that many of you, will aspire at some point to become CMOs of companies. And, certainly analytics, insights all play, a huge role in being a good marketer, frankly. But I think a lot of it also starts with creativity. And so, as you can see, the title of this presentation is Things I Wish My Father Told Me About Creativity. That is a real picture of my father he came here from the Greek islands before the Great Depression. So I was very close to my dad. I learned a lot of good lessons from him. Anyway, as I talk about creativity, clearly I needed a lesson in creative dressing when I first met my wife. And this goes back quite a few years ago. But obviously I needed I needed a good refresher course on creative dressing at that point. But in any case, as you think about, the role of marketing, I think your first and foremost responsibility is to drive growth in your company. If you're not driving growth, you're not going to last long. And CMOs are under a lot of pressure. Their longevity is significantly less than any of the other C-suite, positions. I think right now it's about 3 years, 3.5 years. It's climbed. It used to be about 18 months, and CMOs would be out of a job. But that's primarily because they're focused on the wrong thing. And you really do have to focus on growing your business, if you're going to be successful. One of the things that I think is interesting, today, is that standards are being set by other companies and other places where people have unique experiences. and I love this quote, your last best experience anywhere is now your minimum expectation everywhere. So when you have a great experience in another product category, that basically sets, that sets the level of your expectation when you're dealing in other categories. And if those categories aren't up to that level of expectation, you're going to have extreme customer dissatisfaction. So, one thing to take away from this is that don't just look within your own category, look outside your category, for best in class experiences. I think all too often, and a lot of CMOs have gone down this path and have really, gone off kilter, is that many people believe that, marketing equals advertising. Advertising is a critical part of marketing, but it's not the be all and end all. You have to be much more sophisticated, in your marketing approach today. Certainly a great ad campaign, built on great insights can shape the market's perception of the product, but you have to think about, product innovation, pricing, distribution, media channels, and certainly analytics as the customer, moves along the customer journey. Maybe simplistically, the way I often think about what good marketing should do is it should give a company momentum. It should help to propel the company forward, create some buzz, not in a frivolous way, but in a substantive way. And when I think about momentum, this is a useful formula in physics. Momentum, as a formula is defined as mass times velocity, right? So an object, with mass times its velocity equals its momentum. And if you think of a company as sort of an object in space, right? You can have great mass and have very little velocity. And so you're slow and lumbering. You can have great velocity, but not have any scale or be hurtling off in the wrong direction. So as you think about creating momentum, you need to be nimble and you need to move the company along, but you also need to be mindful of the direction you're moving in and also building scale over time so that you gain competitive advantage. Now, creative thinking is central to driving momentum. One of the ways you should think about creatively driving momentum is redefining the customer experience. So one example of that, or a couple of examples of that, is if you think about Netflix and Amazon, both of those companies use algorithms to deliver highly personalized recommendations to consumers. Banks and tech firms use AI-driven chatbots to quickly resolve issues. So, these companies are helping to redefine the entertainment experience, the financial markets experience. Another way to think about applying creative thinking is to eliminate friction points. Friction points, think of them as just simply areas of frustration for consumers. So if we look at some, simple examples of ways companies are eliminating friction points, one-click ordering, when you're online, the integration of mobile wallets into apps. If you think about Starbucks, where you can cut your wait time, and earn rewards, self checkout kiosks, to get you through the line faster, and easy refund processes. Those are just some very simple examples of eliminating friction points that create satisfaction. And then, one of the more difficult things to do, as a marketer, or as a company is inventing the future and applying your creative thinking to inventing the future. And there are some, amazing examples that we've seen. when you consider that the iPhone was developed in 2007, it's redefined the mobile market, and established the app economy and mobile internet use. Tesla has accelerated the adoption of electronic vehicles, and they're also working on autonomous vehicles. Tesla also, of course, with Elon Musk, and SpaceX is revolutionizing space exploration. So these are, just a few of the companies, and there are many, that are inventing the future in new and exciting ways. Now, how important is creativity? This chart is a little bit, out of date, but as you look at this was done in the Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum, canvassing senior executives on what they believe are the most important skills to possess. In 2015, as you can see, creativity was ranked number 10. By 2020, it's moved up to number 3. And I just checked, I just read through the report the other day. The 2024 report now puts creativity as number 2. So creativity is viewed as an essential skill, and it's one that will serve you well, regardless of what area of marketing you wind up in. But then that begs the question, so how can we be more creative? Whenever I talk to people, they'll tell me things like, well, I don't have a creative bone in my body. And I say, nonsense. Everybody, has an opportunity to be creative. And in fact, according to a study conducted by Inisights out of France and published in the Harvard Business Review, everyone can be creative. Creativity is 85% a learned skill. I was taken aback by that. I thought the number was high, but that is what the research, has shown. Creativity is a learned skill. My definition of creativity is drawing from eclectic thinking and reservoir of experiences and putting it together in a unique and surprising way. It's connecting the unconnected. So I know Andy mentioned before, I had worked at Fidelity for a number of years as the chief marketing officer. And when I was hired, I was asked by the owner of the company, Abby Johnson, to redefine the company beyond just being a mutual fund company. And of course, this was back in 2008, and the markets had crashed by September of 2009. And we did an enormous amount of research. And what people really wanted was guidance and navigation through the financial storm. So that was basically, after listening to focus groups, doing qualitative research, and so on, that was basically the net, takeaway. People were rattled by what was happening. They lost a lot of their wealth, and they needed guidance and navigation, through this, financial turmoil. So now I'm tasked with building a new campaign and repositioning the company. So as I'm driving home one night and I'm mulling over all this stuff, and I had just moved to Boston and I really didn't know the Boston market well. I'm looking at my GPS in the car to get around, and suddenly a light bulb goes on. And I said, that's the idea. What if I can get everyone to think of us as their financial GPS system through life and through this, financial storm? So that gave rise to what was ultimately the green line that we used for 13 years. That was the company's campaign for 13 years. We grew the business in triple digits in assets. And it was one of the most successful campaigns the company has ever had. So, but that's a simple example of how, just observing my GPS in the car led to a simple idea that gave birth to this creative concept of the green line. Um, so this notion of connecting, the unconnected, not Freddie, like Richard Branson, who's an amazing entrepreneur, has developed many, many companies: Virgin Airlines, Virgin Galactic, Virgin Games, Virgin Hotels, Virgin Music. The way he thinks about creativity, he uses this expression, ABCD, always be connecting the dots. So again, this notion of connecting, ideas. Similarly, one of the great minds of the 21st century, Steve Jobs, said creativity is just connecting things. When you ask creative people how they did something, they feel a little guilty because they didn't really do it. They just saw something that seemed obvious to them after a while. So again, this idea of, very often these creative ideas, they come from an insight, but it's often connecting it to something that doesn't feel connected at the outset. So if you're going to, exercise your creative muscles, as it applies to, your research and looking at insights, you really need to feed your brain. And by that, I mean, you're going to need, if we talk about the notion of connecting the dots, you need to add more dots into your brains. So how do you do that? You have to be a student of the world. You have to read news, look at trends, fashion, art, language, design, technology, and music. You take in all these inputs, and they help to create, a rich reservoir of knowledge that you can draw upon in very, very different ways. I'll give you an example. I served on the board of Beth Israel Hospital in Boston, and one of the clinicians, the head of new residents, takes the new residents to museums and then has them observe what they see in the art. And the purpose of this is to help them build some of their observation and clinical skills, because sometimes many of these young doctors are overly reliant on on technology alone, and they need to better build their observation skills and their clinical skills. So again, connecting the unconnected can be very helpful. Another notion, and this is particularly true of research, is don't stop at what is obvious. If you look at an iceberg, only 20% of an iceberg sits above the surface. 80%, sits below the surface. And the Japanese were very successful, at doing this by raising the level of quality, by peeling back the onion and asking why 5 times, like just constantly going deeper and deeper and deeper, to get better insights and to improve quality. So question often is another way of helping to, enhance your creativity. Another thing I tell people is that you've got to get out of your own bubble. You got to associate with people that are different than you. If you only hang around with people who are like-minded all the time, you're basically inhaling your own fumes. You're not getting different perspectives. And I think good research and good, the science of looking at data and whatnot, involves bringing in different perspectives. And it's important to associate yourself with different people. Another thing about, creativity is that I think you can learn a lot by observing children. I have 2 grandchildren. They have little fear of criticism or embarrassment, when they're doing any sort of artwork or activity. You know, they just simply learn to accept failure and rejection. It doesn't phase them. And I think as adults, we lose that, we lose some of that ability. So coloring outside the lines is helpful, and also learning to accept some level of failure and rejection to get you to the next level is important. Now, this particular chart, I think is one of the best charts I've ever seen anywhere, and I pulled it from a Harvard Business Review article back in May of 2012. And I think it's a really useful way to think about how you should grow or think about building and growing a business. You can certainly focus, you know, on your core business, optimize existing products for your customers. You know, that's all fine. But if you really want to amp up growth, you need to start thinking about moving out of your core business sometimes and moving into adjacent businesses. And I'll show you some examples of that in a moment. And then, of course, at the outer level, there's transformational activities that really help to develop breakthroughs that invent things for markets that don't even exist yet. So look at just a couple of examples. When I talk about moving into adjacent businesses, CVS was lumbering along and then decided that it would expand its business into things like minute clinics, you know, and other offerings, and created CVS Health to, you know, to build a new, you know, a new area of their business that they weren't in before, but wasn't so far afield that consumers wouldn't trust it. You know, similarly, Starbucks, I don't know, most of you probably have noticed this over the last several years. They dropped the word coffee from under their logo, and it's just called, the logo is there, but it's just called Starbucks now. And that's because they expanded into adjacent businesses with other beverages and food, you know, and that has helped to propel some of their growth over the years. And then you get into this outer ring here, you know, where you get to transformational businesses like Apple, you know, which is basically redefined, you know, how we communicate, you know, what these devices, you know, do for us. When I think about the Apple phone, you know, from 2007 to now, it's become the sort of Swiss Army knife of communications, entertainment, you know, and others for the 21st century. Airbnb redefined how we access, you know, hospitality, hotel rooms, and so on. Uber redefined how we access transportation, the convenience of transportation. Amazon, Warby Parker, all of these companies have really been transformational and have helped to propel their business. So I'll conclude with these what I'll call six musings on momentum, on helping to drive momentum. My experience, and I think, you know, what I've seen many CMOs talk about, is the fact that you really should shift from product to experience. So if you're going to really grow your business, you know, experiences are difficult to replicate. Products are easy to replicate and are done very rapidly. So shifting from product to experience is an important concept. Be willing to cannibalize your business. This is another important concept. If you go back to the days of Netflix, Netflix started out as a DVD company, you know, was marketing DVDs, and then cannibalized that business by moving into streaming. You know, similarly, Comcast, you know, which is losing cable subscribers, you know, has moved aggressively, you know, into streaming as well. You know, and there are other examples of companies that have cannibalized an existing business, you know, to grow their business. Procter and Gamble, you know, with Tide detergent, you know, has cannibalized some of that business by introducing Tide Pods. So if you can grow the pie while losing some business in one area, and be net positive, that's a good thing, especially if you captured, a trend that is important to consumers. The other thing I would tell everyone is that when you're investigating transformational ideas, those ideas in the outer band that I showed a few minutes ago in those companies like Apple and Uber and so on, you have to realize that transformational ideas have no playbook. Consumers don't often have a frame of reference for these things. So even when you're testing for them, they seem odd because they don't exist. And so, this is an important concept. And as you're testing, you need to make sure you allow for some flexibility here because new ideas don't have a playbook. This notion of incrementally building a better buggy may leave you stranded one day. So you can focus on, incrementally building, moving your product, making it a little bit better. But you've got to be mindful of the fact that somebody could just come by and leapfrog you, one day if you're not focused on innovating and driving the future. Another, I think, very important concept for, marketers and organizations is that you really need to cherish, nurture, and protect your mavericks and creative thinkers. They may seem odd and they may seem like, they don't fit, but they also help to generate new insights and new ways of thinking about things that often, can generate, substantial growth in companies. And so, as a senior leader, you need to protect them and nurture them and allow them, some flexibility. One of the biggest issues I've seen in many companies is, creating organizational barriers, and funding barriers. So you have these wonderful creative people, but you're not allowing them the freedom to do what you've hired them to do. And so, leadership has to eliminate organization and funding barriers, for these, for creativity to thrive in the organization. So those are the six, what I'll call momentum musings, shift from product to experience, be willing to cannibalize your business. Remember that transformational ideas have no playbook. Incrementally building a better buggy may leave you stranded one day. Remember to cherish, nurture, and protect your mavericks and creative thinkers and eliminate organization and funding barriers. Finally, what I would say is just, very briefly, a couple of words about my dad. One of the things he instilled in me was that anytime I sign my name to something, it needs to be the best that it can be, because it's a reflection on him, on our family, his father and mother, and all of the generations that came before. Always bring pride and honor to your name when you sign your name on something. That has served me really well. It's not that I expect perfection from people, but I do expect that when you bring me something, that you're proud of it and it reflects the best, that you feel you can do. And I think if you do that and you follow some of these ideas, you will be very successful. So I'll conclude with that and just ask for your questions.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for speaking tonight. My name is Jacqueline, and I work in the marketing department at Jaguar Land Rover. Not so much a question, but one of the things that really stood out was the switch from product to experiences, and that's something that we've done across all of our cars. But really the genesis of it was with the Range Rover brand. And we, obviously Range Rovers are super luxurious cars. And so, in the last 2.5 years or so, we've really expanded into Range Rover houses. So how do we emulate the experience that a client has in our car in real life outside of the car, and make it more into a brand play and an experiential play as well. And we have seen so much success with these Range Rover houses that it has expanded. It started here in the US, but other markets picked it up, and it's a whole global initiative. So that just really, that point hit home.
Yeah, Jackie, thank you. Thank you for that. I have noticed the Range Rover, commercials on TV, and they're much
That's good to
more,
hear.
they're much more dynamic and exciting. And, they convey an experience that people have, when they're behind the wheel of a Range Rover. I go back to the days of BMW with the ultimate driving machine, right? So that was all about, the experience of driving, and I think Range Rover has done, brought some of that to the Range Rover brand and done so successfully. So great job.
Jim, I was wondering, you talk about like your core and then kind of like thinking far beyond a transformation. How did you in your career get, because I imagine like one of the big barriers is bringing people along with you, right? So how did you like make sure that your ideas, you were able to bring people along with you in order to actually effectively create transformation?
Well, you have a lot of people who are entrenched in their thinking. So, that's in every single company. A lot of it is using, some research and data. I used to rely heavily on showing focus groups and how people actually think and talk about, products. So that was important. We did a lot of testing. So instead of going, 100% whole hog, with an idea, maybe you test it in a limited way. And if you're getting really great results with it, it gives you permission to expand. But there is resistance to new ideas. There's no question about it. I'm sure when Apple came out with the first, iPhone, people just scratched their head and said, "What is this?" Moving from a simple, if you remember those old telephones that looked like bricks, and then we went to flip phones, and then we went to this thing that, basically did everything. It had a camera, video capability, GPS, internet connectivity, and so on. These are ideas, and oftentimes they're driven by people who are mavericks, in companies, people who are passionate. I will say one thing that, you have to demonstrate, passion as well when you're trying to sell ideas through. You have to be a good salesperson. So in addition to all the data, data will only get you so far. There has to be a certain level of passion in how you communicate these ideas. And hopefully you've got management that's willing, to try. In some cases, organizationally, what you could do is create what I'll call a skunk works, where you create, funding and allow for experimentation, in a smaller group, so that you keep them away, from the mothership, so to speak, to allow these little incubators to thrive. So that's, some of the ways you can do that. At Fidelity, we called something Fidelity Labs, where we would test new technologies and different ideas. It had its own funding, and we could develop new products, very quickly in that group and test them.
Last question. Is that the island behind you that your father's from? Is that the Greek island behind you?
Oh, that is the island of Milos. My dad's actually from the island of Rhodes, and my mother's from the island of Crete.
Very cool.
So, and I highly recommend Milos for anybody that's thinking about a great vacation.
I was just there this summer, but not in Milos. It's amazing.
But thank you for that. Yeah. Other questions or?
Yeah, I'm curious about your opinion on the creativity. Like, I think it was like an 85% stat that you gave, and about like
Right.
how it's learned. Like, I think I'm kind of on the same page as you. It seems high, but has there been anything that has maybe changed your opinion or belief of that, like through your experience? Because, I mean, I get, it's hard to say, I guess, like everyone has their own level of creativity. So it's kind of subjective to like what you're used to maybe, and then like what your own level of creativity is. But I'm just kind of curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, I mean, like yourself, I thought that stat was high. But I also think, it's hard to generalize, right? Everyone is different. When I would hire people into creative roles, I would always try to hire people that exhibited curiosity, because I think ultimately, creativity flourishes when you have individuals who are curious about things. And so those people, I think, are very fertile to develop, into great creative people. The people that seem to have like a very singular focus, and again, this is a generalization. So, I always say you can drown in an average of 4 feet of water and be 6 feet, so, but I find that people that are generally very singularly focused are harder to develop creatively than those who are more curious. But I do believe everyone has the ability to be more creative, but they just have to, they have to believe in themselves. Also, they have to be willing to try, experiment, and hopefully get some wins, and have thick skin too.
Yeah.
I know when I would show advertising to people, everybody's an advertising critic, right? It's like looking at art. Everybody thinks they know what good advertising is. And you have to be respectful, but you also have to be firm with people when you're selling, creative work through.
Right.
I did a campaign. Most of you are probably way too young to remember this, but I did a campaign for AT&T called Reach Out and Touch Someone, which goes way back into the like late 70s, early 80s. And we had done an enormous amount of research, with people on why they make phone calls, right? Some of it seems obvious, but what it all boiled down to, if you synthesized it, it was about the emotional benefit of keeping in touch with friends and loved ones. And that gave rise to like a very famous creative line, reach out and touch someone. And then we bolstered that with, creative, where, we showed people connecting and emotionally. But if you have some creative chops, you have to stand up for what you believe in, and you got to be passionate about it and sell it through. And you also have to let a lot of the work have what I call soak time, right? Oftentimes nothing happens instantly. Good creative work, good campaigns have focus, consistency, sufficiency of spending, and continuity. Those elements, all supported by a solid creative idea. Sometimes you have a great creative idea and management gets tired of it after a few months, right? And then it dies on the vine. And a lot of the marketing today is driven by what they call performance marketing. I'm sure many of you, have encountered this. Everybody wants to measure every single little thing, and they lose sight of the bigger picture. So most of these campaigns, that have sort of penetrated our psyche have had time in the market and time to work on us. So I know I rambled on that a bit about creativity and so on, but I hope, that gave you a little bit of insight into how I think about, developing campaigns and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Hi, Rob. Good evening.
Howdy. Sorry, I've missed some of this, but always great to hear you and see you, Jim.
Other questions, comments?
So Jim, I have a question for you. So good news is everyone on the phone works for relatively large companies. Bad news is large companies also often are afraid of creativity. It disrupts what they do best and what they've been doing forever. What are your tips for people early in their career on how to sell in creative ideas?
You've got to bring people along, through your process. If you in large companies, you really do have to share, the research, the insights with people. Show them what things look like, because it's very hard for them to visualize, what an idea actually is. And so I find, what's helpful. So for example, at Fidelity, when we had the green line concept, what we did was we actually showed our leadership team, the CEO of the company. We took her to the agency and we built out, what it would look like in, digital formats, what it would look like on billboards, what it would look like on TV spots, what it would look like in print ads, so that she could see that we had a fully integrated campaign. We bolstered it, with research and consumer testing. We showed what people thought of the work and how they reacted to it, and all of that helped to sell it, through. But it's a process you just have to work through. And again, I think part of it too is you have to exhibit your own passion, for the work, that you believe in it. You have to fight for it. But big companies are challenging. Smaller companies, I think are a lot more willing to experiment and try things and shake things up.
Well, I have a question. My name is Lena and I work for Bank of America. So I work on marketing research. I don't do advertising. So I'm 3 classes in now, so I've been learning a lot. And this class has been really timely because I'm working on a big results package. And I think Andy, you mentioned it in terms of the hook, because financial services is very conservative. I'm working in B2B. And so we're being challenged to deliver insights, and is the way to the hook, the emotional angle, because however way I want to think of it as being the emotional angle with, relationship managers and being able to sell products and services to clients. Is that the way to go about it? Is that the hook for the insight? I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's what I'm trying to do. Like going through all this and bubbling it up to people's attention, rather than looking at a bunch of, percentages of satisfaction scores, because that's what I work on, satisfaction with our company. So, so that's where I'm like, that's where my head is going, trying to get some people to pay attention to and, take action on things.
Yeah, a lot of financial services, if you pull back and you look at a lot of the work that relates to financial services, a lot of the companies are showing similar things, right? There's people running on beaches, they're on sailboats, they're having a wonderful time and whatnot. And that's, all very aspirational, but it's also it's not realistic for the vast majority of people, in this country. I mean, there's a segment, obviously that you want to approach. But I think the key with financial services is figuring out a different, maybe a different angle, to talk, or a different lens through which you talk to people. It may be life stage, so for example, somebody that's young and starting out, might be thinking about, the financial picture very differently than somebody that's retired or going into retirement, or somebody that wants to buy a house, or changing a career or going through a divorce, or, so I think, making financial services as relevant as you possibly can to people at various points in their life, is probably a better way to go than what I see most companies doing now. And then at the very upper end, you have people that are high net worth. They need, tax advice, and they need investment advice, and so on. So, it's a complicated industry, but I think a lot of it, the way it's depicted now, is just not very realistic.
Lena, just to build on that and just to remind, so I met some of you at the end last week, and again, apologies. I teach a course in extension school, so that's why I come in at the end and always want to hear Jim as well. But I think, Lena, you were also addressing how do you maybe make your presentations creative enough to break through to management. At least that's what took your question. And I think there, presumably, hopefully, you kind of know the target even better than you know the respondents in your research. So all the tools you've heard here and all the thoughts pertain to that's your target. Now, what's your message? What are you picking out of that research that, and I think to Jim's point, is unexpected? What might surprise them? What might be there that has an insight, and you can show them how it would work? Jim's example at Fidelity, showing them play out the idea a little. Too often researchers, which include me, we just give the results, as you said. And what you want to do is kind of show what is the implication of that. Suppose we followed this insight, where would it lead? What might a brief to a creative team look like? How might that play out? One other idea that I think is underdone is pick a respondent or two. It's kind of personas, if you've worked with personas, Lena. Yeah.
Right.
Tell the research story through a persona or two. It makes it much more interesting. And then you can back it up with whatever numbers. It sounds like you did a survey. But those are things that I think, most executives are human. And so the same tricks that work in other communications should work on the people you're presenting to. But part of the key is, and I think you already got it, don't just push out the numbers. That's numbing. And, how does that stand out? As Jim said, if all the commercials are the same, you got to stand out. You got to do something different.
So Lena, I'm going to put Kelly on the spot in a second, but because agencies, I think, do this very well, but most people in corporations, and we kind of had a discussion last week, management loves numbers. So we love putting a lot of numbers in a deck, but the reality is there's still people, and emotion sells, which is why I think, there's so many companies out there looking for researchers that are good storytellers. How can I tell you the numbers, but in an emotive way that is both memorable and persuasive? Again, always look at, it's interesting if you're on the ad side, because you sit there in a meeting of marketing executives and it's radically different than when the account planners come in and present the next creative idea that starts in someone's kitchen. And, it takes you on the journey to here's why you will like this idea.
Yeah.
I don't know, Kelly, at VML or anything, do you have any experiences there?
Lots of experiences. Specifically around like storytelling, or what do you think?
Or just selling in ideas using emotion versus just raw data.
Yeah, I mean, like I can just think gosh, we've worked across so many different clients, and it's just like really interesting to like also I think talking with the creative teams is a really great gold mine of information, because they know their clients and how they tick, and maybe the way that they are most likely open to receiving information. And so I think the neat thing that we have is that we have the ability within our research team to work with these teams and almost be like alongside them, but still an independent perspective. And so a lot of times we'll talk to them and go throughout the journey with them to understand how can this information be best relayed to clients. I always love to, like, I come from like a TV news background, and so I think maybe this is right or wrong, but I always think about like what's the hook when we're initially putting information in there? Like, is there one thing, like a big stat that we were blown away by, or something that the team really latched onto? And I try to think about like that inverted storytelling pyramid of like hook them, give them like information first off, and then you can kind of start to narrow down your story as you go. But yeah, I don't know. Those are just a few different things um, that we try to do. But yeah, I think it's so important again to try, and it's more fun for me too to be able to be creative and think about telling a similar story with a few different pieces of research that I do in just different ways. But
One of the things you said, Kelly, is that you finding like a big, sort of a big stat, that would get people to sit up and take notice. And what I've found with, some research colleagues in the past is that they bury you with numbers. And, I used to say data everywhere, not a drop of insight. So you've shown me all this stuff. And it's like, well, what do you want me to do with it? What does it point me to? Is there a single, nugget or something that I can latch on to? And you are right about working closely with the creative people, because ultimately they have to take that and say, okay, how can I take this information and translate it into a creative, a creative idea, that will be relevant and so on.
that is
So
one thing that I hear a lot though too, is the so what of thank you so much for this information. Now what do we do with it? I don't think it solely relies on the researcher. I think it like also, there's an opportunity to talk with the team about, what are some things with what we've learned that we can kind of put forward and help move the needle along. But it kind of just talks to the point of, you don't want to just give the information and walk away, but like start to inspire them in ways that they can utilize it. And I know that our clients have found that to be really, really helpful in those instances. We're able to do that.
also, challenge yourself and ask yourselves, are you measuring the right thing? Are you measuring the right things? That you could be measuring the wrong thing right. You could be measuring the right thing wrong. You could, there's this sort of quadrant, that you can go through. And sometimes, we measure so many things and you wonder, like, is that really the right thing to be looking at? I'm not going to get into a heavy political discussion, especially after what we just went through. But, my big takeaway from all of the data that I saw on TV, that was showing everything was so close, and evenly matched, was that I think they missed the mark in measuring the working class, as sort of like the super idea, like that cut across demographics. Instead of slicing everything up into little pieces, there was this sort of big element of the working class and what they're most concerned with. And so instead of reporting out on that, we got hammered with, here's what Hispanics think, here's what Blacks think, here's what women think, and we kind of missed the big picture on, what the population, the broader population was thinking about. So, as you're doing research and measuring, just challenge yourself. Are you measuring the right, the right thing right?
Great point.
Isn't that where, in some ways, qualitative helps? Because people focus so much on data and numbers, but if you have some focus group information, you can actually bring some live quotes and instances of what people actually say when you're talking about things. Does that help sort of move the story along then?
It does very much so, because, you're bringing an element of humanity to the numbers, and feeling and heart. There's nothing like hearing from people. You don't want to bet the ranch on qualitative data alone, but it is helpful to hear from people and to hear how they're thinking and feeling, about a topic, an issue, a product, whatever.
And Lynn, to that point, there's some great tech companies out there that through your mobile device can enable you to go have a quick conversation with consumers, record it, and then embed it into presentations to, bring the Walmart shopper to life in a presentation. I know Rob and Hawk Partners has that capability also. So there's all kinds of ways, and Jim had mentioned earlier on about, how do you bring that focus group into the boardroom or the executive room? Well, there's a lot of technology now that makes it very affordable and very fast to go out there and get those snippets of, here's what your shop or your brand buyer, your stakeholder says about your product, your company, your positioning.
Lena, you were talking about, B of A before, and I think, when I think about in financial services, a brand is ultimately a trust mark, right? Because I'm turning over my life savings, and everything I've worked for, to this institution, and I'm hoping that you can protect it, make it grow, and sort of share with me strategies on what I could do to change and make it better. And I think for a bank, one of the fundamental issues that a bank has to deal with is what's the role of a bank, in the 21st century, when everything is, lives on my phone at the moment, how is advice dispensed? In the case of Bank of America, I guess, you're using, who is it? Merrill Lynch, right?
Right.
Right. So you've got another brand intervening, in all of that. So what's the role of a bank? Is it just a holding pen for my, for the money I don't want to grow very much because there's not a lot of interest, that you're gaining on that money? Where are the advisory services? Why should I trust them?
Right. Well, it's been very helpful. What you said, Jim, is like, I learned the 80-20 rule earlier, like, or whatever that, that core set of, because I always thought that every client, when they vote or like take our survey, their voice counts, but I've been learning by going through this whole NYU ARFP process that I should really focus on the segment of clients that provide us revenue. So it's been learning, and what you said about looking at, the segment, our target audience, both clients and executives, that'll all be helpful. It's just going to be, a challenge because I've been asked to take it down to 5 slides. What are the 5 key insights? So it'll be interesting.
Good luck.
Women are a great segment for financial services. They've been ignored, for years, and they're huge earners, have a lot of potential. Welcome the advice. If they can find somebody they trust. I think that's an area that's ripe for growth. Whoever, sorts that out and pays some attention.
I appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Others, any other comments, questions?
If not, Jim, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated. Learned a lot. Hope everyone else took some good things away from this. It really aligns well with what we're trying to speak and teach about insights and creativity. So spot on. Really appreciate it, Jim.
You're very welcome. It's a very nice meeting you all, and I wish you all the best in your careers going forward.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
All right,
Thank
all.
you.
Take care. Have a great evening.
Everyone have a good night.
Bye-bye.